all these presenters are very interesting, but particularly I am very impressed with two presentations that in Nepal and Afghanistan. Because one thing what I want to, because diaspora and development, what is development? Development comes if nobody can recognize Ethiopia if there is no US. Because development is something, because earlier it was growth. And development came when all the underdeveloped countries from the colonial rule, they get independent, and there was innumerable problems like poverty, illiteracy, unemployment, ill health, and inequalities, all these kind of things. So what I find in 2 days, because there is interesting things, because we cannot always talk of the good things, because refugee is a great problem. And the refugee and linking refugee and their development, it is the real challenge before the market, before the state, before the international agencies, before the even local self-government institutions. What I have seen, because before before the liberalization 1991, there were Kabuliwalas, the Afghanistan. They are mostly the informal money lenders. But after liberalization, that they have vanished, because liberalization, there are a lot of market came, then we have our own banking structure. But before liberalization, there was economic relationship which dragged them to the India. But after liberalization, what I find, there are other aspects like social development, health. If you go to the Max Hospital, you will find a lot of Afghan people. That means market is, because that is a private hospital, but still they have a philanthropic kind of things because of lack of social infrastructure. How the market has favorably responded to their development. So that has to be. And the second point is that the dominance of India in the South Asia, and India and Pakistan relationship might be the one of the reason for which Afghanistan and India and Afghanistan relationship is. And the third is the culture. Culture is a very factor, because we have a tolerant democracy and people are coming. And the last thing is that you have to see how the market, state, and the municipalities, because they are staying in slums and all these things. It is the role of the municipality that have to come up for their development. These are a few challenges which has to be taken into consideration.
This presented on Afghan and Rohingya refugees who are speaking about. Probably because the Afghanis have a longer history of becoming more, being the migrant in India. And the social networks of Afghanis have a longer history than the Rohingyas. Rohingyas, we can call it like a clear refugees in India. They do not have a longer history of
They have been here for 2-3 years.
So, if you speak about social network, I just want to ask, are you referring to the social network before migration or after migration? Because somewhere you were trying to see a differential picture of bonding and bridging. Very problematic, because that bridging could be because they have a social structure where they feel more comfortable. That bonding can be the kind of first step towards kind of building social capital, but bridging comes later. So probably because I see that the Afghanis have maybe Afghanis are more educated. They are you are telling well versed in the local language Hindi than the Rohingyas. So there are some of the that structural aspect which also contribute to this kind of
Diaspora, Khatija, and Dr. Naresh. So the first question to Professor Sabnum, in your presentation when you talk about the gender dimensions of migration, you mentioned that single women have greater access to NGOs and bargaining power. So, if I've understood that correctly, I was interested in knowing more about that, and if you could build on that, if you have insights from your fieldwork in terms of what explains greater access in case of single women, and the second question is to both presenters, Dr. Naresh and Khatija. The question of African migration to India also assumed significance in the events which had happened in Khirki Extension in Delhi, when the Law Minister Somnath Bharti had ordered a raid in Khirki Extension, and so questions of criminalization and othering and exclusion came about very, very prominently in that one incident. So I was and while I acknowledge Delhi is a different context, I was wondering if there are insights from the fieldwork in Gujarat and in Hyderabad, which either, because both papers in some sense talked about identity articulation. So is there something about othering or marginalization or discrimination that is there? Or is it, Delhi was a separate context? And secondly, in terms of identity articulation, how does this kind of fieldwork also tell us about how African migrants and the African diaspora in India articulates its place in India? So,
question is for the last presentation on Nepali migrants in Delhi. I think just a very quick question. In your questions, especially related to citizenship, and if they have dual citizenship, was there any? The main reason people want to retain a dual citizenship is so that they can vote in the elections of their home country. So are they actively participating in the political electoral process of their countries? Or is it only for the longingness and the sense of belonging that they hold on to their dual citizenship?
I want to ask you, you said this camp, they come usually from western part of Nepal. So is it mainly the Tarai region or do they come from the hills? And is it the kind of a particular community group that they come from or a mixed community? And I would also like to raise one point, usually the current trends of migration from Nepal, usually out here when they come to India, they are willing to perform any kind, diverse kind of labor activities. But in Nepal itself, they do not want to, say supposing the for sweeper or cleaning a house or working in a restaurant, that same activity in Nepal for them would be something which is not regarded as a respected labor, but they are willing to do the same activities when they migrate. So did you if you're not, you can look into that aspect. What is the reasons why certain labor they do not want to do in their home countries but they are willing to do it?
Needs to be clarified. Siddhis are Indian Africans. So this is not the contemporary diaspora that you see of Africans migrating to India. There's that distinction. However, I think Siddhis do offer a very significant sort of entry into understanding racism in India. This whole idea of othering and criminality that you brought up, this is something that I came across in my fieldwork in Gujarat. It was very stark. So for example, in Gujarat they are understood as tribals because Africans are tribals. So they have ST status in Gujarat, not all of them. I think not the cities from the northern part of Gujarat don't have the tribal status yet. Some Kutchi cities don't have tribal ST status yet. Due to the work of missionaries, Kannada Siddhis have ST status, but the ones in Hyderabad don't. So this sort of understanding of Black Africans as primitive, as naturally good at sports, as dancers, as people who can play music for you, who can be guards at banks, etc. These sort of tropes that exist, I think you can trace them back very clearly to in the last 400 years, which is when these communities start emerging also. So Africans are migrating to India throughout. Deccan and East Africa have had this contact for centuries. Why is it that we see these distinct Black Indian African communities emerging? And I think it offers an insight into racism. However, the incident at Khirki would be with a completely different diasporic group. Siddhis are Indians. Indians in the sense of their Indian diaspora.
Sir?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to add? Please.
In the case of discrimination, in the case of Siddhi diaspora, particularly in Gujarat, Junagadh area, we have surveyed in 2 villages. One village is named is Jambur and Madhupur. That is the near about the hill forest area. So what we have noticed in the case of discrimination aspect, Siddhis children are going to, Siddhis have a separate school. Okay, their children going to separate school. In the case of like Patidar and other higher communities, children are very less compared to other communities. Mostly children belong to cities, those who are getting education, particularly government run school. And in case of locality aspect, they have a separate village. And villages are well connected to the towns. They have a road, every facility, basic amenity facility like road, transport, everything. But in the case of like homogeneous, they are particularly dominated by the cities tribe. And in the area of this particular two villages, they come under the category of scheduled tribe. And and if in the case of like political participation, they have a lack of political participation. They come under the particular taluka, and the person who are the panchayat leader. Actually, if panchayat leader belong to the other caste, so they he or she don't think to welfare of this community. If person belong to this particular tribe, then he is more favorable towards their own communities. So this kind of problem has been noticed at the ground level.
Okay, regarding the first your question regarding the of course Kabiluwalas have been here for a long time, and of course one interesting point, one important point which I forgot to mention was that the majority of the Afghani refugees in Delhi, in India in general, is is the Hindu and the Sikh Afghanis. And the Muslim Afghanis are just the fracture of it, but again numbering more than 10,000 of course. And regarding their social networks, of course Afghanis are an advantage here because they speak the language. Even some of them speak like intermediate level of Hindi even before their arrival in India. Why? Because of the they watch TV, the Hindi soap operas, the Bollywood movies, so they are familiar with the with the culture already. Plus it's a more similar culture, right? And so when they arrive here, they already have some established networks, right? Or even if they don't have very close relatives or friends living in the area, then if you're familiar with the landscape of Delhi a little bit, like the Bhopal area and the Lajpat Nagar, they are highly concentrated in that area, especially. But you see, once they arrive in India, especially in New Delhi airport, what they see is like, oh, it's not like in the movies. So they have a total, shock in a way. And then they go to these restaurants or Kabuli hotels, and they ask for advice from the people. And what they see is actually sometimes they find a place to live much more easily through their social network. But most of my response, at least to me, of course, it's not a representative analysis, since it's based on fieldwork, on ethnographic details. But it's also interesting that many people, even outside my respondent group, told me that there's lots of deceit, disloyalty, and lack of trust, and they were deceived by this, initial contacts when they first arrived in Delhi, and that's one thing. And what else? Regarding the Rohingyas, of course, they just arrived a couple of years ago, 2 3 years ago, mainly from Bangladesh. So and they don't speak Hindi language. They don't have symbolic, capital that much, social capital that much. So they have to be inside their social circles. But the thing is, even within the social circles, they feel the need, especially the men feel the need to expand these social networks because they want to have access to certain economic resources, right? Like, for example, finding employment. So they turn into these Muslim NGOs like Koba in Hyderabad and like Zakat Foundation in India and other foundation in Haryana. So to find employment and better housing. And for example, the municipalities thing, of course, these NGOs are working very closely with municipalities in the areas where they live, and the land that was given by the Muslim business people usually, and then there was some sheikhs built overnight
and this is where they live. But it's again very temporary, and people are really afraid they might be out sometime soon. Because then the municipality authorities might take over and then decide to construct something else, for example. And regarding the gender dimension, yes, single women, it's interesting how, you're desperate and then you have to work for it. So for these single women, or especially female-headed households, they have one thing in their mind, and that's to actually to survive and to have a better lifestyle, to give a better lifestyle and education for their children. So in order to be able to do that, for example, some of them, I met a young lady, and she was escaping from forced marriage because her husband died because of Taliban, and actually he was kidnapped by Taliban and then learned that he died later on, and she was forced to marry her brother-in-law as a second wife. So with the help of the family and other friends, so she had to escape Kabul and came to India instead, and with 3 children. And so what happened is that she got in touch with Don Bosco and an NGO working together with the UNHCR with them, and then she became like a leader among the refugee community, among the Muslim refugee community, and started a program, Syrian program, for example, to make some money. So it was really interesting how she build her resources, use your new social networks within the UNHCR officials, within the NGO representatives, and then started this program for the other refugee women. So they have more access, and sometimes they demand more money, for example, and UNHCR helps them also much as they could, because they're also short of money at this time. So.
First question about the dual citizenship. As I already told in my presentation, that these people are not earning so much money. These people are really going home. They are going home very less. So, though they are following the news about Nepal, they are listening to news, they are doing everything they can, like talking to the people who come from Nepal and asking them about the condition in Nepal, what is going on. They get all the information about Nepal, but they are not so much active and participating in other political activities or election or anything. Holding a dual citizenship is somehow related to their belonging, as well as to the easy access, to the things. When you go to Nepal, though it is open border and though Indian people can easily go and do things there, but if you hold a Nepali citizenship in Nepal, it is much more easier for you to go there and to not only relate and to do many other things as well. And about your question about the specific caste or class of the people coming to this Parvati camp, say that there are few people who belong to the Mongoloid groups. However, lots and lots of people who live there belong to Brahmin and Kshetri caste, and there are people coming from Tarai as well, Tarai region of the Western Tarai, but these people also belong to the Kshetri caste. So they are not proper Maithili or Bhojpuri speaking, community. One of the reasons why you said why they are not willing to do the same kind of work in their home must be because in Nepal you have a lot concern about the self-prestige, especially when it comes to caste and when it comes to work. The work that they are doing here in India is considered a very low-level caste work in Nepal, and as a high caste people, if you do the same work there, you will not be spoken even properly by many of the people who are living in the same locality. They would start looking you at as someone who has done the work of low caste people or untouchables or something like that. Sweeping is considered the very low work, low level work, low class work, low caste work. So these might be the reason they do not do the same work in Nepal.